Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Risk, the podcast where risk management experts share their experience and best practices with us. Today, I have the chance to welcome Luay Asadi. Luay is the head of group ethics and compliance at Careem, and he will share with us actually a lot of good stories and probably a lot of good best practices as well on corporate compliance and governance. Luay, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Frederic. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be on your show. I feel good. Thanks for the time.
Perfect. Thanks a lot actually for making the time. Luay, you are actually the head of group ethics and compliance at Careem, but maybe not all of your audience today will know about you. So I will just actually have a quick presentation and then we can jump into your discussion if it's fine for you.
No, absolutely ready.
So, Luay, you are not just another professional in the field of compliance and audit. I can say that personally because I've known you for a few times now. But you are a pioneer, shaping the way corporations navigate the complex waters of regulatory requirements and risk management. You have a career spanning several industries, which is going to be very useful for us actually to learn from you today. You have cultivated a unique blend of skills in compliance, in ethics, and internal auditing as well. You currently make significant impacts at Careem. You have an approach combining strategic foresight with practical solutions to stay ahead of the curves and in a dynamic regulatory environment. Um, Honestly, today I'm very happy to have this insightful episode for the guest. I'm sure we'll uncover a lot of your journey, your expertise, and to explore the different challenges and invaluable lessons that you will share with us. So thanks a lot for making the time. But first of all, I'd like to focus a bit more on your personal career. How have you made actually your way into compliance and governance and ethics? What was your story behind it?
I think it's a difficult question, and I think I'm not sure if I have the answer. I think it's a combination of both coincidences and meeting people that I actually liked and enjoyed working with. So when I graduated from university, I did an accounting degree, and I had no clue, about compliance. I've heard of compliance, but I really never imagined that I would really have a career in compliance, right? And I think it was, I did my master's in the UK, and then I, started working for Ernest and Young. And at Ernest and Young, at that time we had what's called business risk services. Business risk services was diverse. Was a combination of internal audit, ethics and compliance, risk remediation, internal controls, you name it. So I had the pleasure of working in all of these, dynamics. Whether it was internal audit, working with pharmaceutical companies, automotive companies, banks, the United Nations, not-for-profit organizations, and really, had the overview of the entire spectrum of risk remediation and risk services, right? And I think one thing really stood out for me is I really enjoyed working on investigations, anti-bribery, risk and corruption. I really enjoyed working that. And then for the number of industries I did that, I just felt that I was becoming increasingly more attached, and I just something I wanted to pursue in my career. And then I think I was fortunate to work with some really senior counsels in compliance, some partners at Ernest and Young, which I really felt inspired by. And I think this is what led me to lead a career in ethics and compliance.
When you were a child, did you want actually to become a police officer, for example, because of your loveliness for these investigations somehow?
Not at all, not
Not
at
at
all.
all.
I always felt disciplined as a child, and I always felt that I wanted to do the right thing. I never had the ambition to become a police officer or a firefighter in that respect. But I did always, have an interest of, doing something which was ethical. I was always on time. I felt that, I have a duty towards, ethics. My dad always, inspired me to do always be on time, be ethical, do the right thing. And I think that really resonated in me when I was growing up. And then I think just by naturally working at Ernest and Young and getting to know that there is this discipline, this field of ethics and compliance, I just felt that I really became more and more attached to it.
Okay, interesting. Now that you are at Careem, could you actually explain shortly what's your exact role and responsibilities to get actually a better understanding of what you do on a daily basis somehow?
That's another great question, and I think Kareem is a great company, and it's Kareem is more than a company I work for. It's a company where I feel that I own, right? I've been in Kareem since 2019, the vision of Careem is really inspiring, right? So Careem is a company which really tries to add value to people and become an inspiration. And if you look at the short history of the company, the company was only founded in 2012, and up until today, it's really come a long way. It's really had an inspiring journey, right? If I just talk very briefly, over 2.5 million captains or drivers working on the platform. We've touched the lives of over 50 million people, made their lives easier. And Careem has evolved from not just being a ride hailing. We have now what's called the Everything app. So on this app, you can order a ride hailing, take a bike, and stroll through the city, order groceries, food, um, everything from like laundry, vaccines, COVID, whatever it is. The company has really evolved from not just being ride hailing, but to the Everything app, right? And to that really inspires me and has become really an inspiration to many people in the region, from Morocco all the way to Pakistan, right? And I think I became part of this journey in 2019 when the acquisition of Uber happened. So Uber acquired Careem in 2019. And, it's like um, an American listed company is acquiring this rather infant startup. And, you have all these, enormous compliance challenges all of a sudden, right? And I, worked at that time with my predecessor to establish the ethics and compliance function and all the associated work streams with that function, right? So we quickly got to work, understood what we had at the time, and started really quickly, crafting together a program, right? And the program is like any other program, right? Whether it's third-party due diligence, conflicts of interests, anti-bribery and corruption, code of conduct, governance, risk frameworks, legal compliance. We kind of put together all of that, put together a very strong team, right, and took that forward to the next level. And I think over the last 4 years, we've had just a journey of just development and maturation over the last couple of years. And again, I stress there's no one fit approach. And in compliance, compliance is compliance, but there's no one fit approach for compliance. You cannot just take a compliance program and paste it in another company. Although we say a lot of the same things and try to do a lot of the same things, it's very important that, as a compliance officer, you understand your business. You understand where the business is heading. You understand what your risks are, and your program addresses that. Thus, becoming very close to the management, the board, understanding the priorities of the company, where it's heading, is incredibly important. And it's even more so when you have a parent who's listed on the in America, right? And you have all these disclosure requirements, antitrust requirements. You just need to be aware of the entire thing. And it's really added to me professionally a lot. I'm indebted to Careem for this opportunity forever. It's really helped me as a compliance officer, and also to my predecessor, Tomel, right? He's really like one of the pioneers in the field, and I learned a lot from this experience with him.
Yeah, that's actually I can vouch also for Tomele. Actually, he's very knowledgeable. Actually, very open. Actually, to provide this aspect. But on what you mentioned, actually, I have so many questions already. So going backwards a bit, so you have an experience starting at Ernst and Young. Then you work for many different what I would call legacy organizations within this region. What's the feeling when you come from actually working for these kind of organizations that are well established with different processes in place and so on, and then you join Careem actually, and then you have to build something from scratch and to build your own policy. So is it a difficult task? Is it easier because you don't need to rely on anything already? I mean, not anything already in place, but how would you define
I
your?
think it's a great question. Sometimes you walk into a company and they have an established
Yeah.
program, established governance framework. The management is aware of it, but I think it's incredibly challenging when you have to do something from scratch, right? And it's not the design of the program. It's educating the entire company on what the program is, right? And making sure that risks are mitigated, right? So as a compliance officer, we play a critical role in understanding business risks, right? And then you have to formulate a program which addresses those risks. So in this region, there are risks. These risks are prevalent in many regions. But as a compliance officer, you have to be really aware of these regional risks, of these cultural aspects, and make sure that you address these risks, right? So I think when you come from a more mature company, right, it's the program is pretty much established. Yes, it needs development, it needs maturation, it needs some design elements here and here, but it's much more difficult to design a program from scratch, and that alone in a smaller company. When you have bigger companies, whether it's Unilever or Ernst and Young, these are all global companies, so they've heard about compliance, they know about it. But when you work for a smaller company, right, where compliance was not necessarily something that people have heard of, it's a lot more challenging, right? Not just to design, but actually to educate colleagues about it. And what I found is really amazing. When you tell people about compliance, when you educate people, when you tell them these are the risks, people are actually very receptive to that, right? And always reaching out, how can we help, how can we add transparency, how can we decrease the risk, how can we solve for the company? And that's something I noticed in the region as well, is people, when you teach them something about compliance, they're very receptive to it, right? And they really try to support in providing the necessary support to the team.
Okay, perfect. I have actually other examples personally sometime, because when you put compliance, sometime people will feel that you put also some challenges or barriers into their own processes. What I used to do actually, for example, a salesperson, what I used to do with my clients actually to help sweet the deal, if we want to call it like this. And when you come with processes in place that you need to respect like this, it would be a bit more reluctant or actually show a lack of involvement. So in your experience at Careem, it has not been the case actually. Everyone has been
So
quite
let,
receptive.
let me take a step back, not just in Kareem, but in the region, right?
Okay.
So let me say, in this, for example, as I said, compliance is compliance, right? And a lot of the companies are pretty much doing a lot of the same things, but they'll tailor the program to meet their needs on anti-bribery, code of conduct,
Yeah.
third-party due diligence, all of these big things, right? But for example, if you look at the MENA region, right? A couple of examples. First things first. Um, Gifts and entertainment. From a compliance point of view, there are challenges there, but we live in a culture where people like to give, right? It's just part of the DNA,
Yeah.
right? So you can't stop that. But what you can do is ensure that there is adequate transparency in the process, right? So that is something which you as a compliance officer have to be aware of. There are certain things you cannot stop, right?
So you're
But
adapting actually global
exactly, you
standards
have to
actually to
adapt
their
global
building.
standards and really ensure that they you educate the colleagues on how to put transparency in them, make declarations. Who are you giving the gifts to? Who are you receiving gifts to? That is very important from an anti-bribery and corruption perspective, right? So you're not necessarily stopping it. You're not being a showstopper to the business, but you are ensuring that there are adequate checks and balances in what you do. The second example is on working with charities. Again, um, people in this region love to support.
Yeah.
We've seen that in COVID. We've seen that with earthquakes. We've seen that with flooding. We've seen that all over the region, whether in Egypt or Pakistan or the UAE or Saudi. People here love to support. And again, as a compliance officer, you need to support that, but at the same time, educate them. Who is our charity partner? Where are the proceeds going? Where is the money going? That's what's important. The important is not to stop it. The important is to support the business in an ethical and compliant
It's to
manner.
put a framework.
Right? So it's exactly to put a framework to see, are we auditable? Are we transparent? That is your key responsibility as a compliance officer. Your responsibility as a compliance officer is not to be a showstopper to the business. Yes, you want to be stringent, you want to be firm, you want to have governance, but at the same time, you need to be supportive.
So you mentioned about the local culture, and you need to regionalize some of the different standards or the global best practices. How does it happen when you got acquired by a listed company in the US, where we know actually the criticality on compliance and ethics is actually very high standards, and they need to have some kind of understanding that it's not going to be possible to apply everything. So what was the relationship between the two compliance group or visions?
I think the direction always is, we need to have a strict compliance culture, but addressing the issues and the direct particulars of the business needs, right? So again, you have to really map out what are the risks we have, what are the issues we have, and address them one by one. And again, I say a one-stop solution will not fit every business, but you have to be firm. You have to address the risks. There are extraterritorial requirements on anti-bribery, corruption, third-party due diligence, all of that. You have to do all that. You have to understand. When you work with a third party, who are my third parties? That's incredibly important. And not just that. Who are the owners of my third parties, right? I found that when you establish a process, but you don't educate colleagues on it, no one's going to follow it. But the moment you actually establish a process, educate the colleagues on it, and tell them why we're doing it, what are the risks to me as a company, they will really support you in doing that, right? So that's my bottom line, is really ensuring that there is buy-in for the process. People understand why we've done the process. It's not just like, hey, we want to establish this process. No, it doesn't work like that. There's a reason why we've established the process, and the reason is to protect the company. That's the bottom line for me.
Okay, yeah, that's the most important at the end, actually. So you have mentioned, actually, that Careem has expanded so much over the last few years in the Middle East and Africa region. I guess there are differences between Morocco and Saudi, Egypt and Qatar, for example, and Pakistan and the likes. How do you manage, actually, to have these different countries, cultures, perspective in place, and to educate them, actually, to a central vision of compliance and ethics? Was it difficult at first, actually, to adapt yourself to what's happening, or was it actually smooth to make it, like you just explained, that everyone was willing to support?
I think it's always challenging when you implement a new program, right? Because the dynamics of the markets are always different. So whether you're in Morocco, whether you're in Saudi, whether you're in Pakistan, things just work differently, right? So you really need to be aware of the different markets, right? And what's really important is you have a team to support you in that, right? So you have local compliance officers in the different markets who support you in this education and training program, right? So your education and training program has to be tailored to those markets. Again, you can't just say, this is our program for everyone. It doesn't work like that. And I always like to stress the importance of local language. That is, I found that to be especially important when you have, for example, in this region, an Arabic speaker on the team, right? We see like commercial licenses in Arabic, some of the legislations in these markets in Arabic, in Pakistan in Urdu, right? In Morocco, for example, some of it are in French. So when you have someone who's multilingual, who understands Arabic, who understands English and other languages which are prevalent in the region, you really can understand the way, the dynamics of the market. And I think your training and education program has to address the requirements of every market, right? The responsibilities of colleagues will not necessarily always be the same in different markets, right? So whether, for example, you're on market X or market Y, your responsibilities might be different. We might have a regulator in one of the markets that's asking for something, and a regulator in another market that's asking for another thing. So again, you really have to be aware of, what are my requirements operationally, and address those as part of your compliance program. So again, it is challenging. It is not like you can have one strategy for all the markets. It does not work that way. And then you see some of the markets will have synergies. A lot of the regulations, we have seen a lot of regulations which are saying the same thing. There are anti-bribery regulations in many of the markets. They've adopted the UN guidelines, OECD, all of those have been kind of adopted in one form or the other. So in that sense, it makes things easier, but you do have to be aware of the local market needs and the local market requirements. That's very important as a compliance officer.
Speaking of new regulations, like you mentioned, we have seen actually a lot of things happening specifically in this region, in the UAE, Saudi, and GCC as a whole, with regards to compliance, anti-bribery, corruptions, and the likes. You that have experience across so many markets, what would you say are the unique characteristics of the UAE and the GCC as a market with regards to compliance? Are there specific difficulties or challenges or aspects to compare to other ones?
I don't think there are difficulties or challenges. I find these markets, they've really developed regulations and legislations, and we've seen that, for example, with privacy. There's lots of privacy regulations. A lot of markets are adopting GDPR like as a best practice, and many of the legislations we see are like coming up, in the standard. Regulators are a lot more interested in your compliance programs. So I see that as a compliment, as actually a support to any compliance program. I don't see it as a challenge. Um, I think in the last 10 years, the compliance domain has really evolved in this region, and we have seen a lot more interest, right, from companies that are really hiring many compliance officers. Many of them here are from the region. I attended a seminar lately, and I saw many of the compliance officers from this region, which is really good to see. They were from Saudi, UAE, Egypt, all across, and I think the profession has really developed in this region lately, which is really good to see, right? And you see more of this happening across the globe, right? Whether it's in APAC, whether it's here in the Middle East, whether it's in Egypt, there is a lot more interest in compliance, right? And I think the other thing which is also important to stress is it's not just compliance, it's ethics and compliance,
Mhm.
right? That's part of the equation that people don't always see, whereas our obligations are to ensure compliance, but we do want to encourage the ethical guidelines across the business, and that's where we also play an important role. Is what is our position, what is it that we as a company want to do, right? And is to spread ethical conduct in the company and outside of the company, right? So for example, our supply code of conduct, that spells out our position on what we expect third parties to abide by, right? We have our own code of conduct. We train colleagues on the ethics on our code of conduct as well. So I don't see any particular challenges. To the contrary, I see as the industry is really developing, and it's really supporting compliance officers.
Have you seen some differences on before and after you've actually implemented this code of conduct and trained your different stakeholders within the company? Do you do some monitoring some time actually of if it's actually respected or?
I find it very difficult to monitor if it's respected or not. But generally speaking, we do see a lot of buy-in for the code of conduct, right? And we do see colleagues, across the board, in the different companies who are really supportive to the code of conduct, and really embedded in their day-to-day activities. Now, the code of conduct is not. It's sometimes what we call the bread and butter of all of our policies, right? So we expect colleagues to kind of gain an appreciation for the code of conduct, understand the code of conduct, and really embed it in their day-to-day lives, right? We don't expect colleagues to become an expert in all policies.
Of course not.
That's that you can't ask for that, but we can expect them, to really understand
To do the best efforts
and do
actually.
the best to do what's in the best interest of the ethical guidelines of the company, right? And then always speak up when there is an issue. We've seen that, for example. I've seen speak up has become more prevalent here in the region. People, when they feel that there is an issue, or they feel that there's an area where we can improve, they raise their hand and say, "Hey, this is what we realized," and that's really the right thing to do.
Do you
Yeah.
have working groups across the company, across departments, sometimes discussing some of these technologies and what could be the impact in terms of compliance or governance or ethics, for example?
Yeah.
Like another department will tell you, okay, Luay, I believe my team actually would like to work on this specific technology. I have some questions related to compliance and ethics. Is it something that you do from time to time?
Absolutely. We will always team up with other departments to understand the risks. If another function flags the risks to us, or wants our, we try to be a trusted advisor to management, right? And and opine on any risks we have. And if to that extent, if we feel that there is an avenue for us to support, we are more than ready to do that.
Okay. Speaking of team members like this, you touch rapidly, I believe, one unique set of skills necessary to be a good compliance officer, which is being multilingual and to be able actually to speak the local languages and to get a better understanding of the culture. What would be other traits that you believe is important actually to be a good compliance officer
So that's
within
a,
your
th-
team at least?
that's a great question. I think one of the traits of a compliance officer is curiosity. It's just really being curious and, really wanting to really deep dive into processes and understand how the company is working, right? I don't think that you have to be of a certain background to be a good compliance officer. I've seen compliance officers come from various backgrounds, right? But I think it's very important that you are close to the business, understand, you know, where the business is heading, what are my risks, what are my key concerns, and you design a compliance program that mitigates these risks. That's what I think is important. But I think compliance officers are incredibly hardworking, very detail oriented. They have an amazing skill of writing. They can really write reports, write memos, um, are into the details of things, right? Have an interest in working with understanding third parties, have an interest in investigations, right? That's really what the profession is about. Understanding my conflicts of interests, understanding, as I said, third party due diligence, understand how to do due diligence, doing the investigations, working with the privacy team. Um, so that entire spectrum of ethics and compliance is very important to have an appreciation of. In addition, which I think is curiosity, language skills, and even an appreciation for the profession, right? So it's not everyone's cup of tea. I understand that, but I still, and I think if you have an appreciation for ethics and compliance, that is something you should explore. There is a lot of information available out there. So if you do simple internet research, you will understand a lot about the function of ethics and compliance. And then to the extent that you really think that this is something you want to deep dive into and explore, I would encourage you to speak to people from the industry, speak to people who are working in the field. And then something else is explore a professional qualification. So even if you're not from compliance, you could still do a professional certification in compliance, and that's going to give you a lot of the appreciation for the profession. And then finally, make that move. If you feel that's something for you, then by all means, start embarking on an ethics compliance journey. And I think for me, it's been a very it's really added to me personally, and it's been very insightful to me and how I see companies.
And to link the last two subjects, do you think that the advancement of technology might actually change the qualification necessary for the future generation of compliance officer, actually maybe focusing a bit more on these soft skills compared to the other hard or art skills that you mentioned a bit earlier?
I think, Fred,
I don't know.
I'll
I'm
be
asking.
diplomatic. I think the answer is I don't know, and I think technology will affect everything. So the way things are going with AI and technology, everything will change, and compliance is definitely not immune from that, right? So I think the bottom line is, be curious, keep an open mind, and just learn, and things definitely will change.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Luay. I just have a few quick fire questions I would like to ask you as well,
Sure.
just actually to feel a bit more about what you are as a person and a professional as well. Dubai or Abu Dhabi?
I think for me it's UAE. I love this country. It's my home, and I'm fine with both.
Okay. Beach or desert?
I think none of them.
Okay.
You'll find me in the mountains.
The
I
mountains?
like skiing, and I prefer to do winter sports.
So where would you go actually if you had to choose, or in the region or a bit further for
Austria. I'll
Okay.
go skiing in Austria, and I'm an Austrian national, and I like to go skiing in Austria.
That's why actually you speak German. I saw that on your
Yes.
CV. I was actually willing to ask you the question.
Yes,
So,
yes.
okay, actually very nice. Early bird or night owl?
No, definitely early bird. I never stay up late. I always get up early and try to do things as early as possible.
Then cooking at home or dining out?
Dining out, I'm not a cook. Something I have to learn.
So, traditional or innovative compliance solutions?
I think I've been traditional, in all honesty. Very, very lately, I've tried to, broaden my horizons with AI and other technology. So I think I should be moving to innovative, but I've been more on the traditional side.
The curiosity in you will actually help you make this move
hope so,
actually
yeah.
for likely leading or managing teams.
Leading, I mean, you definitely want to lead a team, and you want them to manage their own. You don't want to be overly involved with the team's efforts. Let empower them to do their work, and that's going to be the best thing for you.
Perfect. Hands-on experience or educational backgrounds?
Hands-on. So again, a lot of people don't study compliance, right? People just end up in the, because they're a lawyer or because, they come from various backgrounds. So I think on the job experience, learning on the job is really in the best tool you have.
Internal audit or ethics and compliance?
No, ethics and compliance.
Okay. So your days at Ernst & Young actually behind you.
I hope so.
The focus is here.
Exactly.
And the last one, confidentiality or transparency?
Can we do both? I think.
I mean, it's your choice. Tell me.
I think confidentiality.
Okay, perfect. Luay, thanks a lot for your time today and for actually sharing these good best practices to our audience. For anyone who followed this episode, please like, share, comment, anything. And until next time, please enjoy Behind the Risk podcast and don't hesitate actually to connect with our guest on LinkedIn. They will always be available, like Luay just mentioned today. They are always willing to share their experience and best practices. See you next time.
Thank you, Fred, for having me. And if you have any questions, just always hit me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. Bye, Luay.